2,000 years later.
Hi everyone! After an 8-month absence, I am back by unpopular demand. I'm really sorry that it took me so long to get this video done and posted. I had started it back in August of last year and only just finished it a few days ago. For some reason, speed paints were always so nerve-wracking for me to do, and to top it off, I wanted to milk my digital art skills as much as I could and put a lot of time and effort into this one piece so I could have a video on my channel that I would actually be proud of. I have a lot of other videos lined up too, but I had locked myself into getting this one done first because I promised I would in my Upside Down Challenge video, and I clearly wasn't expecting to have so much anxiety working on a single drawing. Lesson to be learned, don't reveal what the next video will be before you finished it. I also haven't been able to post nearly as much as I would have in the past year, and I'm very upset about that. I alluded to this a few times in past videos, but a lot of personal upheavals were going on in real life, and I underestimated what an impact that would have on my creative life. To give you a quick overview as to what went down, since I'm allowed to talk about it now, from December of 2017 to October of 2018, I had to basically live in hiding at someone else's house while my parents were going through a divorce without any source of income or idea of when I could return home. In the beginning, I thought that I would be in a really good mindset since I would be away from my abuser and in a new setting, but alas, things inevitably got worse before they got better, and I pretty much fell apart. Now I'm back in a much better place psychologically, and I definitely don't take my father's absence for granted. You guys are here for a Draw and Talk video though, and not to listen to me whine about personal stuff, so it's time for me to finally dive into the crux of this narration, which is a rundown of my latest project, The Orchard House! Woo! Before anyone gets worried, this hasn't taken over Space Drops or TCU in any way. There's a lot in store for TCU. I'm sure you noticed the title changed to Most Town or Ghost Towns at this point, which I'll address in a future video. Space Drops hasn't gone anywhere either, although it's still on an indefinite hiatus until they figure out a proper way to tell the story. Heirloom Star is still a thing too, but that's always been more of a side project than anything. The time it took for me to finish this drawing, all told, when I was working on it on and on for over half a year, clocks in at 40 hours at the very least. That's 40 people. At first I was going to have mercy on you all and chop all my footage down to a more bite-sized length, but then I figured, hey, you guys haven't been waiting all this time for just a 15-minute video, so grab your favorite heavily caffeinated beverage because you're gonna be stuck with me for the next hour of your life. The basic Cliff Notes synopsis for the story is as follows. Set in a time later than our present day, the fate of the world's survival is faced with a silent threat. There is a faction called the Black District, consisting of autonomous AIs called Antennas, who possess special powers from their life source, heart charms. And the Antennas are on a mission to systematically target and kill humans in order to revive them as Antennas themselves, who will do their bidding. To stop this takeover, 5 girls of disparate backgrounds from the island of North Hope are granted their own charms and a new identity. Now they have become stone architects, humans with powers comparable to the Antennas. Together, these fruit-themed heroines must overcome their differences and work as a team to put an end to the Black District's machinations, save the human race, and find their own roads of fulfillment along the way. From left to right, we have our 6 main protagonists. Pink is Cornelia Tosh, red is Cheryl Cohen, purple is Janine Cohen, green is Layla Rogers, blue is Winona Reese, and yellow is Dakota Monroe. Now, if you've watched my first old art video, some of those names might sound familiar to you. Although it may at first seem like this story came out of left field, this is actually a finalized version of one of the oldest story drafts I've ever written. Here I'm going to briefly touch upon the story's various incarnations and how they sort of impact the newest version. Pack your bags, y'all, we're going on a tangent. It all started one Friday night in the far-off distant time of like 2007. Or early 2008, I don't really remember anymore. I was in 5th grade at the time and had recently watched The Incredibles for the umpteenth time, when all of a sudden I felt motivated to write a novel series inspired by what was then my favorite movie. Before this new revision, there were 3 drafts of the story, all of which were very different. There's the elementary school drafts, which is called The Supernatural Spies, the middle school drafts, called Blood and Gemstones, and finally the high school drafts, during which the title got changed to Across the Ebony. For the elementary school drafts, besides The Incredibles, other sources of inspiration were Animorphs, Goosebumps, Geronimo Stilton, Totally Spies, Bolt, Super Brats, and maybe a little bit of Witch and Harry Potter. The plot of the draft was pretty straightforward. I never finished any of the novel drafts back then. I would either get writer's block and abandon a story, or get an idea for another story and completely forget about the other one. But I at least finished 2 whole volumes of the Supernatural Spy series, even though I never brought the story to its conclusion, and what I had completed were hot messes to begin with. It was kind of like The Room, I guess. Between the years of 2009 and 2011, the middle school drafts had come to be. At the time, I was simultaneously going through my weeaboo phase and teenage angst phase, so that had a really huge impact on the story, mostly with there being a lot of edginess and fan service. Instead of a novel series, my goal was to draw the story as a manga, and now it was set in the magical girl / esper genre with a little bit of mecha. Although at one point I did try to bring it back as a prose fiction novel series because I didn't have enough confidence in my drawing abilities at the time. The plot and characters got a complete overhaul. For one thing, there was now a clear ending in mind, even though the story was a lot less structured, and the characters had their powers given to them purposefully instead of gaining them by accident. When the Supernatural Spice conventions were tossed out, so were most of the stories that inspired it, and the works that helped form Blood and Gemstones included, Tokyo Mew Mew, Cardcaptor Sakura, Black Rock Shooter OVA, Shugo Kara, Lucky Star, The Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya, Toho Project, Hayate the Combat Butler, Maximum Ride, Amazing Agent Luna, A Certain Scientific Railgun, The Last Mimsy, Star Wars, Code Geass, Magical Girl Lyrical Nanoha, Deers, the Get Smart movie, a bit of Avatar The Last Airbender, and a bunch of movies from the MCU, just to name a few. In addition to the main story, with its full title being Blood and Gemstones, Warriors of the Melancholy, there were villain-centric prequels and what-if spin-off manga scenarios I had planned at the time, with equally fanciful and cringy titles such as Tears and Gemstones, Beer and Gemstones, and so on and so forth. Although I was active on YouTube and invested in the fanime community at the time, I almost exclusively posted Figma and Nendroid reviews with the occasional mediocre AMV. Any talk about my manga was between me and a small group of like-minded online friends I met back in middle school, where we role-played as ROCs, wrote short fics and chapters of our stories, and included Easter eggs of each other's works in our own very, very liberally. Even then, I kept a lot of details about Blood and Gemstones purposefully vague since I was dead set on having it published by an OEL manga company, and I wanted my friends to be surprised when they finally read it in the form I had intended. That's a big thing I regret about the Orchard House's history, as I cheated myself on an opportunity to start making a name for myself as a creator until about 4 years later. In mid-2011, up until very early 2014, the manga underwent more radical changes. During this time, the title got changed yet again to Across the Ebony, based on a misheard lyric from the infamous hide-and-seek song, and the plot was a lot more grimdark and pessimistic, with the main character becoming disillusioned with being a magical girl and falling into depression before dying in battle. Lots of fun. There was practically no comedy of any kind anymore, and in its place was a lot more cerebralism, psychological horror, and graphic violence. It must have been really fun at parties back in high school. Some of my primary inspirations at the time were Sailor Moon, codename Sailor V, Magic Knight Rayearth, and, most of all, Yume Nikki, Black Rock Shooters anime, and Pura Magi Madoka Magica, both the original anime and manga, as well as the Kazumi and Oriko Magica spin-offs. Even so, continuing development of the story was starting to feel an awful lot like Weekend at Bernie's, if you know what I mean. The story was officially cancelled after 2013, which was the same year I had developed TCU's first draft, and I was faced with a one or the other dilemma about which of the two stories I would keep, since they had a lot of similarities at the time. Across the Ebony ended up being scrapped, half because I wanted to explore TCU's potential as a new story, and half due to me being aware of all the huge flaws Across the Ebony had, with my reason being that it would be better to tear it all down and start all over again if I were to make it any good. But it wasn't until late 2017 when I finally brought it back onto the title The Orchard House. I never imagined it would ever come back, and it feels good to be able to return to it after 3,000 years. Especially now because I feel my time apart from it really helped it ferment and start to form the foundation for something bigger and better. Although The Orchard House is another completely different draft, it does borrow a lot of elements from the story's previous iteration, probably more so from the middle school drafts, but with it being a magical girl style manga. Hopefully my bad taste in stories doesn't show up too much. I don't want the manga to be nearly as dark as the middle and high school dress, but at the same time I don't want it to be child-centric either. I'm aiming for it to be a balance of quirky, lighthearted fun and more heavy subject matter. My love language is stories with child protagonists pursuing what's right, being pitted against corrupt adults, and having to make grown-up decisions. And that's what I want the Orchard House to be based off of. Okay, I think I said everything I can about the basic plot and its history now. Most of my stories are very character-driven, so now it's time to dive into the next part of the video, which is a brief overview of our protagonist. And because I'm paranoid and I'm afraid that as I keep developing being the character, some of this information will become obsolete, I'm posting a commentary-free version of this speed paint at the same time as the one you're watching now, so that I can make that one public and this one unlisted in case that happens. So first up, obviously, we have our main character, Cornelia Tosh, who I've been drawing for the past few minutes now. Her family is one of the wealthiest in North Hope, and because of that, she tends to be a spoiled brat and care more about her relationship than her character a lot of the time. Despite that, she is not exactly of the fancy and ladylike variety either, and is a mix of feminine and tomboyish attributes. She likes some girly things, but her father and her older brother were her two biggest role models when she was young and thus takes after them a lot. Her token non-magical friends are both boys, and she tends to feel like a deer amongst lions when she's around other girls. She has a personal garden, but enjoys catching bugs and climbing trees when she's outdoors just as much. She also prefers practicality to glitziness and gets a little annoyed when perfectly good old-fashioned solutions are seemingly cast away to usher in something high-tech. Apart from her flaws as a bratty rich girl, she's still a genuinely good person who tries to show compassion toward others whenever she can, on her own terms. She also has a very strong fascination with ancient Egypt, which her parents really want her to outgrow. Her fruit is peaches, her colors are pink and yellow, and her weapon is an umbrella. In the original draft, her first name was Courtney, and in lieu of supernatural spice being inspired by the first Incredibles movie, her character was modeled somewhat off of Elastigirl. She belonged to a typical middle-class suburban neighborhood, and in addition to her parents and a big brother, she also had a cat named Amber. That's pretty much it. I mean, I know it's common for main characters to not have as much development or standout traits as the rest of the supporting cast, but Courtney went beyond that and was just a totally malleable character. Because you had her as the only sane one of the group and some of the side characters being more goofy, but when the POV changed to Janie in Volume 2, she became the straight man of the bunch and Courtney was the goofy one. In later edits of Supernatural Spies, Courtney's role in the story got smaller and smaller, Michelle and Janine becoming the main characters and Courtney filling their supporting character role, then being their normal friend until finally being deleted from the story altogether by the time Blood and Gemstones gained traction. Of all the characters that I did for this Speed Paint, Cornelius is probably the one that I'm the least proud of. I don't know, it's just, I really had a hard time replicating the image that I had in the initial sketch. But it still turned out good enough at least. Oh jeez, her eyes look so creepy. As you can probably tell in this part of the drawing, the coloring is starting to look really stinky. I had the bright idea of completely rendering all of the characters, like when I was doing each specific character, instead of just doing all of the characters like based on each stage of the drawing process, which it didn't actually look very well, and it kind of got a little inconsistent later on. I ended up editing a lot of this coloring in post though. Can you tell that this part wasn't scripted? Also, this speed paint made me realize that I really hate coloring jeans. Next up is Cheryl Cohen, who is probably the easiest character for me to describe, and also kind of the hardest in a way. You'll see why in a bit. She's a bit of a wild child, always cracking jokes, sticking her nose where it doesn't belong, is gutter mouth, gutter minded, and overall the character most likely to get arrested for disturbing the peace. She can't stand anything serious and won't miss an opportunity to diffuse the tense moment with comedy. She's somewhat lazy and has very few hobbies or lasting interests, with the exception of playing practical jokes, photography, and scrapbooking. And even the last two are things she does very mechanically. Sometimes she does really get into something, but more often than not her interest fizzles very quickly, and she's the type to throw out the baby with the bathwater if something or someone disappoints her in any way. If she does derive pleasure from doing something, odds are she's motivated by irony. To her, nothing else in life matters except turning a stray cat in her neighborhood into the next big internet meme. On a more positive note, she is fiercely loyal towards her family and will give anything and everything of herself to provide for them, mostly by trying to make them laugh if she sees they're feeling sad. And if you mess with them, she'll mess you up. She's also a shipper of ships and sometimes tries to play Cupid in other people's lives with varying degrees of success. And surprisingly is easily starstruck by fluffy clouds of fluff. So yeah, she's basically a crouching jerk hidden cinnamon roll. I hesitate to call her garbage because there are other characters in the story who are infinitely trashier, so compost, I guess. Save the earth, y'all. Her fruit is cherries. I'm sorry about that pun. Her colors are red and white, and her weapon is a pair of yo-yos. In all previous story drafts, her last name was Clarks, and her personality had many drastic changes from version to version. In the elementary school draft, she had powers over invisibility, and the wisecracking aspect of her character was still mostly the same. She was heavily inspired by Marco from Animorphs, maybe a little too heavily now that I've been rereading the whole series. Yet she had the most initial anxiety and reluctance toward being a superhero compared to the rest of the cast. When I hit my weeaboo phase at age 12, those aspects of my latest microfixations were reflected in her personality too, as a consumer of manga and anime and speaker gratuitous Japanese. From the middle school draft onwards, Cheryl became the main character of the story as Courtney's roles gradually got smaller, and in Blood and Gemstones she was established as an unlikable bully type character / borderline nymphomaniac who often resorted to physical violence to get what she wanted. By the time the high school drafts came around, she had become a dark and brooding Byronic heroine who sometimes had an extreme infatuation for one of the main male characters. Unlike the elementary school and middle school drafts, where their personalities are blended into the current Cheryl's character. The only thing high school draft Cheryl has in common with her Orchard House incarnate is that they both wear glasses and have acrophobia. Also lately, my friend has been replaying Fossil Fighters Frontier and Dahlia reminds me so much of Cheryl and it's messing me up so bad. And yes, petting your cat is a big priority. I don't know if you've noticed this while you were watching the speed paint, but I have a little eye chart that I did for the main characters, the main 6 characters, just so that I could, you know, break out of my shell a little and draw different eye styles that make steps in avoiding same face syndrome. But because the eyes were over 130 layers total, there was no way I wanted to reach all of those, so I just copied and pasted all the layers onto this drawing so I wouldn't have to redo them all over again. So I'm sorry, but you know, what matters is that it looks good, right? Yes, as you can see, I really had a hard time doing dynamic shading with hair as dark as Cheryl's. At one point when I was doing the drawing, I had company over while I was working on the coloring, and so at one point I went downstairs just to have some conversation with them, but I forgot to turn the video recorder off, so it was just like, even when it was sped up, it was just like 5 minutes just staring at the same frame, and I didn't realize it until I came back upstairs. Or maybe I did realize it and I just didn't know how long I was gonna be downstairs talking to family members, so that was awkward. I cut it out in this version, but in the Patreon version, it's still there. Whoops. Now we have the younger of the Orchard House's Able sisters, Cheryl's fraternal twin Janine Cohen. Also ended up completely redoing her sketch later on, so don't get too attached to what you're watching me draw now. In many ways, she's the polar opposite of her older sibling, and they're both foils for each other. Although she's mostly polite, quiet, and unconfrontational, so as to counterbalance Cheryl's rowdiness, she's a little snarky and can be scary on the rare occasions when she does snap. She's also very absent-minded, primarily due to her bad habit of playing video games and listening to music during important conversations, and she's almost never seen without her signature lime green DS. Ironically, she's never been able to bring a single game to completion. Other interests of hers including spreading environmental awareness, watching terrible daytime TV shows, vegetable gardening, growing indoor plants, baking cakes at midnight so as to cope with insomnia, and collecting unconventional musical instruments like ocean drums, ocarinas, singing bowls, automaton. Perhaps her most prominent trait is her ability to catch feelings with great frequency and intensity. Despite that, she's the type of person who tends to flirt a lot but becomes an embarrassed tsundere if anyone flirts back. She's incredibly easy to scare and tends to freeze up and draw blank in perilous situations, which, combined with a tendency to not necessarily be a team player, doesn't bode well for her during her 10 years of Magical Girl. Her fruit is plums, her colors are purple and green, and her weapon is a bubble blower. Currently, I'm working on making Toy House bylaws for the characters, and in the general information section, I list 3 canon characters who are similar in personality to my character. In addition to the 3 characters I chose for Janine, there are 3 other characters that she has a lot in common with, but the thing is they're all guys, so I felt weird about including them. Said characters are, in no particular order, Luigi from the Mario franchise, Television from Chibi Robo Plugged Into Adventure, and Wallace from Wallace and Gromit. Her character evolution throughout the previous 3 drafts is pretty interesting to me. In the Supernatural Spies draft, she was pretty much the serious one of the group and had an oil and water type relationship with Cheryl. Whereas Courtney was inspired by Elastigirl in The Incredibles, both Cheryl and Janine were inspired by Violet in different ways. With Cheryl, it was mostly her powers, and Janine had a similar personality. However, as the story progressed, she slowly began to take over the story until she had became the main character and basically put Courtney and the others on the bus once the second book rolled around. I think it was because she had powers over telekinesis. I was trying to explore her potential. Other than that, she didn't really have any standout traits besides being slightly weird. For a good portion of the middle school draft, Jean had a more emotionless personality and almost never spoke. It's also what inspired the current Janine's design, as the Janine at that time wore glasses and nothing but mismatched skirts and sweaters. I don't think she had that development for very long though. What's really weird about the high school drafts is that Cheryl and Janine's personalities were swapped compared to the relationship they had in the earlier drafts. In the first, second, and current draft, Cheryl was the boisterous one, and Janine was the meek and lovelorn one. But in the third major story draft, it was Janine who had the more fiery personality, and Cheryl who was more submissive compared to her. To this day, I still don't know what happened that caused her characters to switch, and I'm still kind of scratching my head about it. In all the previous drafts, she was among the characters with the least amount of character development or growth. She just happened to be a spotlight stealing Mary Sue, so trying to revamp her has been kind of a challenge for me. It was also at this point in the drawing that I discovered vector layers for the first time, and now I've already forgotten what life is like without them. Big thanks to Ali-chan for teaching me about what they were and how to use them. She also has her own manga called Magical Princess Sky, which I very strongly recommend if you're into magical girls. It's kind of like a perfect marriage between Tokyo Mimio and Cardcaptor Sakura, so if you're into those kinds of stories, then I suggest checking out Ali-chan because she has really good stuff. Another huge aspect of her personality is her fondness for inline skating, which she also wears when she transforms, but I forgot to draw them in this part of the video, so you see me editing that later on. Also around the time that I started drawing Janine was when I finally got my second monitor, so I could pull up references on my screen instead of just looking at my tiny phone screen. Yeah, that really made a world of difference with this speed paint as well. When we finally returned back home after everything was settled, as I mentioned before, my dad had left some of his stuff in the house, and since he's like the tech guy of the family, I was able to find a computer monitor that he left lying around, and I was able to hook it up and get it working and use it to help me out in this video. And as you can see, that beret looks really ugly so far. Hell, have you never seen a hat in your life? It looks kind of like a Rasta hat, which wasn't exactly what I was going for there. Some other changes that I did to this part of her drawing were to adjust her body weight, since I didn't want them all to be skinny minis, and because I made a mistake earlier, and it kind of looks like she's right-handed instead of left-handed, which she is. just want to say that I really like how the shading on her rooks came out. That is all. What are you guys' headcanons as to what game she's playing? I think she's playing Animal Crossing. Or Xenoblade Chronicles. And yeah, shading those rollerblades nearly crushed my soul. Next up is Layla Rogers, who's the oldest of the 5 girls, and despite her being the 4th member who joins the Orchard House, she actually had her powers much longer than Cornelia and the Coen twins have. Out of all the characters, she's very much a closed book compared to everyone else, so there's not a whole lot I can really share about her, but I'll try my best. She's the resident couturier of the team, evoking a cool, mature, and emotionally detached persona. She has a deep-rooted dislike for the Antinous, which initially extends toward the members of the Orchard House. Being used to working alone for so long, she initially views the other stone architects not as potential allies, but as usurpers trying to interfere with her objective. A great deal of mystery surrounds her, namely about how she became a stone architect and why she has a disproportionate amount of power compared to the other characters, but she refuses to discuss any details that will reveal anything about herself, no matter how innocuous these details may seem, and ideally prefers to let other people talk for her. Her favorite pastimes involve anything athletic, including rock climbing, dancing, figure skating, and playing organized sports such as volleyball or basketball, and she's happiest when outdoors. She's overall preoccupied with her health and is also the token vegan of the group. Despite appearing to be distant and serious, she has relatively simple pleasures in life, such as big dogs, super fluffy bread, and any animated movie or video game with a talking skeleton in it. She's also the only main character whose hair is dyed and not its natural color. She's actually a ginger. Her fruit is limes, her colors are green and red, and her weapon is a glaive. In older drafts of the story, her name was Kayla, with her last name sometimes being Appleworth. In the Supernatural Spies draft, she made her first formal appearance in the second volume of the story, despite being low-key alluded to in the first book. Unfortunately, she didn't have a huge role in the story, as Janine quickly took over as the central character. Despite that, she was among the younger members of the group and had a very typical, if not flat, personality, although she did have her love for sports back then. Originally, she was a giantess and not intended to have any powers, but then she got abilities over manipulating her size. I tried to word this in the script in a way that didn't sound creepy and perfect, but I just couldn't. When the Blood and Gemstones drafts rolled around, Kayla's personality underwent dramatic and semi-permanent changes, having a darker yandere-esque character. Her current personality is more modeled off of that version of her character, but toned down quite a bit and possessing more nuance. You should know something very important about me as an artist. I hate drawing exposed limbs. So, even though she has a long sleeve shirt, it's still sheer, and she has a top on over it. It was just really painful because I'm not used to drawing bare arms and stuff like that. So that's why everybody else has long sleeves and she, for all intents and purposes, doesn't. I also gave her shorts as well, but at least I gave her long boots to make it a little easier on myself. Do you guys ever have those moments where you're drawing something that takes up a lot of time and you're playing something in the background to help it go by a little faster, and then when you look at certain parts of the drawing you can hear what you were playing in the background as you're looking at it? Yeah, that happened to me a lot in this video. Like I said before around the first half of the drawing when I was doing Cornelia and all that, I was originally planning on just rendering each character completely before I moved on to the next one. But around the time I started doing Layla, I realized that this was a horrible idea. So you'll probably be seeing a lot of inconsistency as I toggle on certain layer groups, and some characters look more completed than others in this part of the video. Oh jeez, this is awkward. What's really sad about this drawing is that I spent so much time shading her body so that it would look good, but because she was the tallest and in the back, you could barely see it, so all of my hard work was wasted. Well, not exactly wasted, but it's like I had an opportunity to cheat because you couldn't see it. And I don't know what I'm even saying anymore. I don't regret putting all that effort into her drawing though, it's just kind of sad that you can't really see it in the final version. And yes, I have Cornelia's layer group toggled on because, unlike Cheryl and Janine, Layla has the longest hair of the group, and Cornelia was the only one whose hair I shaded at the time, so I had her on for reference. And yes, her hair was a nightmare to shade. I also didn't shade her shorts or her boots in the video as well, and also her legs I also didn't post. Like I said, speed paints are really nerve-wracking for me to do for some reason, and because these were things that were giving me a lot of trouble, I just needed to just work by myself and learn how to get this right without worrying about pressure being on me as people are watching this video. I'm sorry if that's disappointing to anyone, but that's just how I get a good result. At least I was able to get most of her drawing done on camera. And finally, our fifth heroine of the bunch, who has about 75% overlap with your average manic pixie dream girl, Winona Reese. Although she doesn't look like it, she's actually the second oldest member of the team. She attends the same school as the Coen twins and wants nothing more than to fit in with the popular girls. Just like Layla, she's a dog person. However, Winona almost exclusively stands corgis, whereas Layla really likes big dogs in general. She also loves anything involving horses, especially collecting miniature plastic models, which she tried to have star in a YouTube series when she was younger. As for the quality of said series, let's just say it had a lot in common with Power Rangers and Nick Studio 10. Like Janine, she's also incredibly easy to scare, but she's able to bounce back very quickly and not allow fear to paralyze her. Although she easily becomes close friends with her teammates due to having an encouraging and uplifting demeanor, she's just as frequently bewilders them with her almost constant string of clumsy and naive pratfalls, usually coming off as a complete airhead. This, however, belies a very pragmatic and self-sufficient personality, and she's able to easily think outside the box, mostly in the realm of coming up with imaginative ways to use her powers. She can be a little unpredictable at times, not necessarily related to her eccentricities, and has a mean temper. Of all the main characters, she's the one whose sense of humor and her way of relating to other people is the most reliant on memes. She and Dakota have known each other for some time prior to the beginning of the story, and they appear to have a very close relationship. Her fruit is blueberries, her colors are blue and purple, and her weapon is a compact. Unlike the other Orchard House members, Winona was actually not based off a pre-existing character from the Orchard House's older drafts, which made it really hard to integrate her into the story. I struggled with her for like half a year until I finally settled on her current personality. I'm sure you may have seen some signs of that early on when I tried to draw her, since before she had more of a Dante personality type. Her sense of fashion was very different too. Back when I was trying to develop her, she wore more trendy outfits, whereas now she almost always wears PJs. She pulls a lot of inspiration from some people I know, so hopefully her quirks won't seem too forced. There's a very specific character that I modeled her off of, but I won't tell you who it is. But I will say that this character is not from an anime or manga or anything like that. It's a character from a Western series. I'm sure you may have noticed that what I'm line arting right now is different from the initial sketch that I did near the beginning of the video. I actually redid her sketch twice because before I just really did not like how the anatomy turned out at all. And also, like I said, the change in style, I wanted to reflect that in the newer sketch. I did a second sketch that I liked a lot better, but I still wasn't satisfied with it because the body language didn't look exactly right. And then I finally settled on this one, which I think looks a lot better. I was so stuck on a post that I actually referenced model sheets of Miyuki from Smile Precure to find a good template that I could use as a springboard for this particular pose. It's not exactly the same as what was in the model sheet, but if you look at it, I'm sure you'll find a few superficial similarities. Also, because she wasn't based off of any character in the original drafts, when I said before that I wanted to give the characters different eye styles, and those eye styles are actually based off of different ways that I would draw eyes and all the different styles that I used during the various draft incarnations that the story was in at the time. But because Winona didn't have that kind of dynamic, I just drew her eyes the way I would normally draw eyes. If you've watched my inverted color challenge video, then you may realize that I accidentally made Winona's skin color a lot darker than it normally is in canon. I actually like that color so much that for a time I tried to incorporate it and make it canon, but it actually didn't really work out. Like, it wasn't like a bad skin color or anything, it just kind of clashed with the rest of her color scheme, so alas. I also kind of made a somewhat embarrassing mistake with this drawing with Winona. I'm sure it's like something that you wouldn't notice if I didn't point it out, but when I first drew this, I was planning on her being the shortest character and Cornelia being the second shortest, but then I decided that wouldn't exactly work out well, so in the new draft, Winona is still taller than Cornelia. But because Cornelia is leaning down, then if she were standing up straight in this drawing, then she would still be taller than Winona. Oops. I could have changed it if I wanted to, but honestly, Cornelia's part of the drawing frustrated me so much, and I'm just like, if it looks good in the drawing, then I don't want to change it. I just want to be done with her already. That hand is way too detailed. I mean, I really like the style of shading that I used there, but it just didn't match with the rest of the drawing at all, so I just had to erase it and start over again. I also wanted to use her to experiment with giving my characters detailed lip shading on color illustrations, but look bad. Scrap that as well. There's a lot of scrapping going on in this video, I've noticed. Last but not least is Dakota Monroe, an auxiliary member of the Orchard House. Also the one responsible for giving the girls their powers, providing information that will aid them in their battles, and eating all their food. Even before the Orchard House is formed, Dakota has connections with some of the team's future members, namely being a rhythm guitarist in Cornelia's older brother's band and having a very tight-knit relationship with Winona. Despite appearing to be a relatively open person, Dakota is slightly enigmatic, mostly regarding how a seemingly ordinary teenager has such specific knowledge about the incidents or creating charms. Although noble and responsible, Dakota can be somewhat selfish and preoccupied with not being the center of attention, almost to the point of being passive. Regardless, anyone Dakota considers a close friend is kept under fierce protection, especially Winona. While level-headed and serious for the most part, Dakota has a lighthearted and playful side, and has a tendency to innocently tease cute girls in order to get them flustered, again with Winona being her preferred subject. Because of the power of cuteness and manliness and overall ikemen factor, Dakota's the object of one of Janine's many crushes, and is regarded by her as the coolest, hottest guy she's ever seen, until she inevitably finds someone else to fall in love with 15 minutes later. Of all the main characters, Dakota's style is probably the most versatile, ranging from snappy metrosexual to 90s grunge poster boy and the occasional guilty pleasure ugly Hawaiian shirt. Dakota is also in possession of an enormous appetite, but only really indulges due to being broke most of the time. If budgeting wasn't a factor, then it'd be a whole other story. In all previous drafts, Dakota's name was Derek Monroe, no middle name, and his first appearance was relatively late in the first incarnation of the story, almost crossing over into the middle school drafts. Back then, he was the primary love interest of Janine, although in later drafts it was Cheryl who had a crush on him. There is very little variance to him from draft to draft, except in the first major draft I think he was an alien. Although he had a lot of Gary Stu traits that really made him unintentionally obnoxious and maudlin, he was probably secretly into guys too. The only standout traits he really had were his love for food, which has been carried over to the current draft, and complete social ineptitude. Not in a good way. Who do you think has the better cow lick, Dakota or Cheryl? Let me know in the comments. It was also in this part of the drawing that I had to face my fears and learn how to shade jeans for real this time. Fortunately, I was able to pull up some good references this time that I hadn't had access to before, so once I finished shading Dakota's jeans, I was able to go back and fix Cornelia's jeans in post. For some reason, my shading style with this seemed to really change when I went over to Dakota. Like, I don't know, because I was trying to get so much contrast in there and trying to figure out the textures of the clothes and stuff, it kind of looks like something from a 2005 visual novel. I ended up adjusting the contrast later on, and I think it looked a lot better. now it's time for me to come up with a half-donkey background. To be honest, when I was first sketching the drawing and coming up with the composition, I didn't have any ideas for what I could do for a background, so it was all kind of on the spur of the moment. I think what I did looks nice though in the finished product, even if it's mostly just brushes and image materials that I already have downloaded in Cup Studio Paint. Thanks for listening to me talk about my OCs for this long. I wish I could end this video with me telling you where you can rate the Orchard House, but right now it's not done yet. I'm still in the bricklaying stage for the story, and I'm not sure how long it'll take for me to come up with a final draft, but I feel like I'm getting closer to the end stages. There's still a lot of characters to develop, internal logistics to figure out, and above all else, an actual ending that needs to be drafted. My personal philosophy is not to have a story done until I have an ending figured out. But I have a little less than half of the story mapped out, provided there's no huge draft changes between then and now. And I seriously think it's nearing the point of ripeness. I want to release a lot more content about the story and its characters in the meantime, whether it's animations or artwork or what have you, so be on the lookout for that while I continue fine-tuning the story. My intention is to post comic pages online and then have a print volume released later on, but I'm still kind of grappling with how I want to approach this method. I want pages to be easily accessible to people who are disinclined to donate money, but at the same time I feel like that if what I'm posting is exactly what's going to be put in the finished book, then there will be less of a reason to get print copies, which isn't exactly healthy for a career. I was thinking of either having very detailed sketches in a typical manga page layout, or finished artwork in a vertical webtoon style format while having completed pages available on Patreon, but I still haven't settled on one or the other yet, and I'm sure there are other ideas that I haven't thought of right now. What do you guys think? Although manga making was and still is the form of visual storytelling that comes the most naturally to me, a small part of me wants to make a fanime adaptation as well. Mostly because I want to hear my OCs talking to each other after over a decade, but also my intention when I first created the story was to have it adapted into a film or TV show, so it'd be a nice full circle cycle if that were to happen. However, there's a huge amount of characters because I have an unhealthy addiction to ensemble casts, so holding auditions for them will be a pain among many other issues, so quote me on that. Maybe I could do side story mini-sodes, you know, like those 30-minute holiday specials Peanuts would do that would make up a bunch of smaller short stories. And yes, it was at this part of the video where the illustration became this giant, unstoppable, unquenchable beast. Because the file size was so big, it was slowing down my computer so much, and loading time for saves and auto data recovery took so long that it took like 20 minutes at a time. I'm just like, oh, I'm so cold. But I'm being held hostage by these long loading times. Help. Another reason why I'm really happy to finally get this done. And yes, I also had a bunch of transparent flower effects cover over some of the mistakes I made in the drawing that would have been too much effort for me to fix otherwise. It looks nice in the composition though, so why question it? We're finally getting to the end of the video! Thank you again for your patience while I was gone, and I hope you're looking forward to the Orchard House's release. I got a lot of cool videos queued up and ready to upload, so my channel will be getting a lot more active. Until next time, bye!